Tonight on Reporting Scotland, the House of Commons pays tribute to Alex Salmond. Allies and opponents alike spoke of their respect and affection for the former First Minister, who died suddenly at the weekend.
Alex was a very proud son of Scotland, but he was also a son of this House, of which we ourselves should be proud.
Alex Salmond served at Westminster for 25 years. Also in tonight's programme, the 7,000-mile journey from the South Atlantic to Dundee for a memorial to explorer Sir Ernest Shackleton. We'll find out what makes Wemyss Bay the nation's favourite railway station. Ronaldo fever hits Paisley as the Portuguese superstar trains at St Mirren ahead of the match with Scotland tomorrow.
Coming up in the sport, Scotland boss Steve Clarke asks the Tartan Army to keep the faith as the national team continue their search for a first competitive win in more than a year.
Hello, I'm Sally Magnuson. Welcome to Monday's programme. MPs have paid warm tributes to the former First Minister Alex Salmond after his sudden death from a heart attack at the weekend. Mr Salmond spent 25 years as an MP, both before and after his time as First Minister. The Scottish Parliament is currently in recess, and a motion has been lodged by John Swinney recognising the substantial contribution Mr Salmond made to public life. But today it was Westminster's turn to pay tribute. Our political correspondent David Wallace-Lockhart has more.
Alex Salmond first set foot in the House of Commons in 1987, before cameras were even allowed in.
Most jobs you get a letter saying turn up at 9:30 or turn up at 9 o'clock on such and such a day. You get nothing at all coming to the House of Commons. You've got to read it in the papers or hear rumours that this is the day to turn up.
Today, the Parliament that he spent decades railing against paid tribute to him.
Robbie Burns once wrote that the heart's eye, the part's eye, that makes us right or wrong. Well, Alex gave all of us in the SNP the belief that what we felt in our hearts was worth fighting for, that the belief that we could one day become an independent nation, and Alex Salmond took us so very close to making that belief a reality.
I was always impressed with Alex's formidable oratory and debating style. No member of any side of this House was given an easy ride. He sat on the third bench where the leader of the SNP is today during the Scotland Act of 2016, constantly chuntering and bantering directly in my ear every time I stood at that opposition dispatch box.
Alex was a very proud son of Scotland, but he was also a son of this House, of which we ourselves should be proud.
He made the campaign for Scotland's independence a political reality, and he changed the course of his nation. That is undeniable.
Alex Salmond did fall out with his former party, something Jeremy Corbyn, who was kicked out of Labour after leading it, has some experience of.
The leader of the SNP spoke very well and very movingly about Alex's contribution to life, and I think that's very generous because the SNP clearly treats its former leaders with great respect, and I think that's a good idea.
Other grandees who have since departed the Commons reflected on Alex Salmond's legacy.
I mourn his death as a friend, but from the point of view of being a member of the independence movement, I regard this as a cataclysm, because I think Alec is irreplaceable at the present time.
Talks with the Foreign Office continue regarding bringing Alex Salmond's body back from North Macedonia to the northeast of Scotland. No tributes yet in the Holyrood Chamber. The Scottish Parliament is in recess, but a book of condolences has now been opened to the public, and a motion has been lodged by the First Minister recognising the substantial contribution Mr Salmond made to public life. David Wallace-Lockhart, reporting Scotland.
I'm joined by our political editor, Glenn Campbell. Glenn, on a day when there have been these warm and respectful tributes in the Commons and elsewhere indeed, what's your assessment of the man?
Well, there's no doubt Alex Salmond has been a huge figure in our politics for decades, and I think it's fair to say he's probably one of the most impactful politicians of his generation. And if I was asked to sum up his impact, it would be that he's the man who led Scotland to within touching distance of independence, and who has made independence a mainstream concern in our politics. But I think there is a big decision he took more than a quarter of a century ago that made that possible. And that was, instead of dismissing Labour's plans for devolution as the creation of a pretendy parliament, it was to take what became known as a gradualist approach, to throw his and the SNP's weight behind the Yes campaign and help it to achieve huge levels of support for devolution, because he saw a Scottish Parliament, rightly, as it turned out, as a platform for the SNP to build support over time, to take control of government for the first time in their history, and then to keep building so that he and his party had sufficient political clout to argue successfully for that independence referendum. Of course, 10 years later, independence as a campaign seems becalmed, but levels of support for independence remain high in the opinion poll trend, and I certainly wouldn't bet against that issue coming back to the fore at some point.
For someone who took his party and his movement and his mission to such great heights, though, it has to be acknowledged that Mr. Salmon's reputation was damaged in more recent years.
Absolutely. I mean, he was the man who spent his adult life fighting for independence, but in recent years he's been fighting for his reputation, at one point fighting for his liberty. There were a string of sexual offence charges placed against him, and he successfully fought them off in a criminal trial. He was acquitted of all charges in a case, though, that revealed at times as First Minister he had behaved inappropriately towards women. Before that, he successfully argued in a civil court that the government he once led had mishandled harassment complaints against him, winning £500,000 in costs from the Scottish Government. And that case led to that huge division, that huge rift with his protege and successor as party leader and First Minister, Nicola Sturgeon. And that caused divisions within the SNP and the wider independence movement that last to this day. Remember, he went off and founded a separate independence supporting party of his own. He has always argued that there was an orchestrated campaign against him, and he's never given up on trying to demonstrate that that was the case. At the point of his death, he had a civil case in the courts trying to sue the Scottish Government, and he thought this case might bring out more information that would back him up. I believe it is now for his family to decide whether that case goes forward or not. But certainly, even today, there are some close political allies of his who say that they will continue to fight his corner.
Last quick word. Everybody's got an anecdote or six to tell about Alex Salmon. As somebody who interviewed him, it must have been countless times over the years, how did you find him to deal with?
He could be charming, he could be very entertaining. He always had a very sharp analysis of the politics of the day. Sometimes, though, I would wince at the way he treated his staff. He could be very impatient and intolerant of his staff, and I don't know, reflecting on that, I wish maybe I'd called him out from time to time. But if you got Alex Salmond at his best, sometimes you had to watch your time, because after the cameras and the microphones were off, he would want to keep talking. And I remember interviewing him in his early days as First Minister in Bute House, the official residence in Edinburgh. And after the interview, he wanted to give me a tour, to show me the silverware collection that had been uncovered in a locked cupboard. And I couldn't get out of the room and was worried about making the deadline for getting the interview back to the BBC studios. He wouldn't have liked it if that had happened, because if nothing else, Alex Salmond always liked to be in the headlines.
Glenn, thank you very much indeed. Some of the day's other stories now. Spain's state-owned shipbuilder Navantia is in exclusive talks to buy assets belonging to Harland & Wolff, which owns 2 fabrication yards in Scotland. Navantia went into administration last month, but its yards continue to operate. Trade unions are concerned that the focus will be on large shipyards in Belfast and Devon, while the fabrication yards in Fife and on Lewis don't have specialist shipbuilding facilities. Glasgow City Council has unveiled major plans to improve the city centre, with 11 projects set to begin in early 2025. The redevelopment aims to upgrade key streets like Argyle Street, Sachi Hall Street and Clyde Street, as well as George Square and the Broomielaw. The transformation is expected to be completed by 2028. The MSP John Mason, who was expelled from the SNP after a social media post saying what was happening in Gaza was not genocide, says he's considering appealing the decision. The SNP described the comments as utterly abhorrent. Mr Mason says he'll continue to serve his constituents in Glasgow Shettleston.
I will certainly not be joining any other political party, so at the moment I am an independent MSP. I was elected for 5 years and I will keep to that promise of serving my constituents for 5 years.
An employment tribunal has been asked to go beyond financial compensation in the case of a support worker unlawfully discriminated against by Edinburgh rape crisis. Ros Adam told a hearing that she felt her former employer had shown a lack of accountability since the tribunal judgment that left her feeling hopeless. Lawyers for the charity argued that Ms Adams' request for further recommendations, including directing the centre to produce a definition of a woman, went beyond the powers of an employment tribunal. Stephen Godden reports.
In May, an employment tribunal ruled that Edinburgh Rape Crisis Centre had unlawfully discriminated against Ros Adams. The support worker believed that people using the service should be able to know the biological sex of the person supporting them. The tribunal judge said that she'd been subjected to a Kafkaesque disciplinary process. Now, the outcome of that tribunal triggered what turned out to be a highly critical independent review of Edinburgh Rape Crisis that found that the organisation had failed to protect women-only spaces. It also found that the CEO, Mriddle Wadhwa, a transgender woman, had behaved unprofessionally and had overstepped her authority. The day after that report was published, Mriddle Wadhwa stepped down, with the organisation vowing to address the concerns that were raised in the report. Now, giving evidence at today's hearing, Ros Adams said that since then she believes there's been a lack of accountability from her former employer. She said that she believes that its thinking hasn't changed and that she doesn't trust that somebody speaking up now about the same issues wouldn't be treated in the same way that she was. The tribunal heard that a compensation figure has already been agreed. That includes a £35,000 payment for injury to feelings. But Ros Adams' legal team argued that the tribunal judge should order a further series of recommendations, among them a public apology and an instruction for Edinburgh Rape Crisis to define what they mean by women-only spaces. Now, in her evidence, Ros Adams said that was important to offer survivors of rape an informed choice about who they want to support them. Now, in response, the organisation's lawyers argued that implementing those recommendations would go beyond the limits of the power of the tribunal. Now, having heard all of the evidence, the tribunal judge adjourned the proceedings and said he would issue a written judgment in the next 3 or 4 weeks. Stephen Godden, reporting Scotland, Edinburgh.
A memorial to the legendary polar explorer Sir Ernest Shackleton has gone on display in Dundee after a journey of more than 7,000 miles from the South Atlantic. Shackleton's best known for his doomed 1915 mission on the Endurance to make the first land crossing of Antarctica. He and his crew were forced to abandon ship and walk for hundreds of miles to safety. Now the Hope Cross, which was erected by his fellow crew members, has been visited at its new home by his granddaughter, as Graham Ogston reports.
A century-old memorial to a giant of Antarctic exploration. Alexandra Shackleton never met her famous grandfather, but he's remained a towering presence throughout her life.
My father was 10, he hardly knew him. In those days, explorers away for years at a time. And of course, there were no communications when you were down south. So he didn't talk much about him. I was aware through the photographs of Frank Hurley. I hope it just highlights why he's important to us. One word, the way he led his men. Also, he wrote poetry, which has to be good. The only Antarctic explorer who wrote poetry.
Following the infamous Endurance mission, Shackleton returned to the UK, but soon became restless and craved a new adventure. His final voyage was in 1921 when he set sail on the quest to explore islands around Antarctica. Shackleton died of a heart attack on board the ship in 1922, and his body was returned to South Georgia, with a cross erected nearby by crew members who couldn't attend his funeral. The cross was packed in a crate at its South Georgia home and loaded onto the RRS Sir David Attenborough in March to begin its 3-month journey to the UK. After landing in Harwich in June, it was stored for 2 months at the British Antarctic Survey in Cambridge, before being transported by van on its final journey to Dundee. The cross is displayed here at Discovery Point, home of the RRS Discovery, which first took Shackleton to the Antarctic in 1901. Dundee Heritage Trust says the cross perfectly complements the museum's story of the brave souls who took on the Antarctic elements.
In 1901 to 1904 was our main expedition that we talk about here, but actually the early age of Antarctic exploration ran right until this last expedition, the Quest, in 1922. So it sort of rounds off the stories that we tell here quite nicely.
For Alexandra Shackleton, it's an emotional reminder of her pioneering grandfather.
To see it here, next to Discovery, where my grandfather started his lifelong commitment to the Antarctic, seems extremely appropriate.
Graham Ogston, reporting Scotland, Dundee.
The World Cup is upon us again, but not that one, of course. 48 British railway stations are in the running for this World Cup, won last year by Wemyss Bay in Inverclyde. 4 Scottish stations are among them this year. Voting opened this morning. Our correspondent Katrina Renton went to find out why Wemyss Bay is so popular.
Every year, railway stations from all over the UK compete to be voted passengers' favourite destination, with one of them crowned top of the stops.
So we've come here to Wemyss Bay railway station to find out why it was a winner and what makes it so special.
It's very handy for both the ferry and the rail.
And it's quite beautiful, isn't it?
Yes, they spent a lot of money on it and did a very good job.
I love it. It's so Victorian. It's like the essence of Victorian style. Lovely, love it.
Just everything about it. It's just different from any other station.
And the walkway down to the ferries, it's kept the oldie worldy look about it. It's really lovely.
The station was originally opened in 1865 and rebuilt in the early 1900s. Throughout the first half of the 20th century, in the summer holidays, people came here in their thousands by train to catch the boat to local islands like Bute. Bobby here depicts one of the many children who would be off on his holidays.
I mean, they actually designed it what they call a lazy S curve.
Right.
So like S shapes so that there's no bottlenecks so they can move huge numbers of people.
So it was really, really busy back in the day then.
Really, really busy. In 1957 there was 10,000 people in an hour on Fair Saturday.
Simon is part of Friends of Wemyss Bay Station, who for the last 15 years have been involved in bringing it back to its former glory.
So how did it feel to win the World Cup of Stations?
Very honoured. I mean, it's not for us as individuals, it's for the station really, and that's why we all do it. We're all volunteers. We all love being in the station, being around the station. People come in with a smile on their face when they see the station.
The group run a second-hand bookshop in what were the old first-class waiting rooms to raise funds for their work in the station.
You obviously have put a lot of love into finding out the history and restoring as much as you can so that people can
We're
share
so
it.
proud of it, and when people come and say, "Isn't this a beautiful station?" We just, it's really makes you feel proud. It's just the most amazing place. People are really astonished when they come here and they walk in and they just,
Can see why you won.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, that's right. We deserved it.
But who will be the deserving winner this year? We'll find out later this month. Katrina Renton, reporting Scotland.
Lewis is here with the sport, looking a wee bit depressed this evening.
A little bit, Sally. It could have been so much better after the weekend, of course, with Scotland. But here's hoping they can pick it up. Not going to be easy, though. Thanks very much. Yes, hello there. Scotland head coach Steve Clarke has urged the Tartan Army to keep the faith with the national team, despite a poor run of results. Scotland squad were back training at Lesser Hampden this morning as they prepare to welcome Portugal to Hampden tomorrow. James Forrest has dropped out of the squad, with Connor Barron moving up from the under-21s.
After 20 years in the international wilderness, this group of players have been to 2 major tournaments. They've got promotion to this top level, the Nations League. So I don't understand why they're why people would be doubting about this group of players. It's a tough moment, there's no doubt about it, but we believe in ourselves.
And this graphic here illustrates what has been, well, results-wise, a year to forget for Scotland. Bad defeats to the Netherlands and Northern Ireland kicked things off. Then there was that solitary win against Gibraltar. I think most fans enjoyed the experience of the Euros in Germany, but the results were, of course, disappointing, particularly the last game against Hungary. And then since then, it has been tough with 3 straight defeats.
They understand that we're playing difficult opponents. They understand also that the squad could be stronger. Everyone knows that. All these things are there to be seen. I don't speak about it too much because I feel it's disrespectful to the boys that are in the squad. We have to concentrate on who we have here. And we have to go out against Portugal, and we know we have to be very good at everything we do in the game. And hopefully we can get the result that might just change the whole mood about the place.
Well, if Steve Clarke is looking for some support during this difficult spell, then he'll only need to look across to the Portugal dugout and to Roberto Martinez here, who previously played for Motherwell. Martinez took his team to St Mirren's Smiza Stadium this afternoon for a training session, and their main man was there, Cristiano Ronaldo in Paisley. Words that I never thought I'd be saying. And we'll have more on the superstar striker just after the sport. But his coach was full of praise for Clarke's Scotland.
They're a team very well organised in dead ball situations, quick counter-attacks, and then they got the quality of players like McTominay, Gilmour, that they got a real excellent final pass. So I've got no doubts Steve Clarke is building something very special. He already achieved a very successful team that he qualified for the European Championship, and now it feels that it's a new, almost a new cycle, and the results will come if the performances stay at this level.
Sticking with the international football, but to the women's team now, and Pedro Martinez-Losa hopes that Caroline Weir and Emma Watson's return from injuries can help the team be more productive in attack. Both players are back from serious knee injuries and in contention for this month's European Championship first round playoff with Hungary after more than a year out injured. And head coach Losa knows the calibre of Real Madrid midfielder Weir, both on and off the pitch.
She's with confidence. She scored a good goal last night, playing minutes, playing Champions League. So obviously for us and for the team, it's great news. Kind of also emotional in one way to bring in a player who's been going through a process, a hard process of recovery. Yeah, and now we are obviously in another moment, hopefully positive for her, positive for the team. And yes, for us, it's a very important player from the leadership perspective, from on the pitch, but also what she brings to us in terms of energy and confident off the pitch.
So yeah, a big boost for the women's team to have those players back from injury. Not something that we can say about the men's team. A lot of injuries there, unfortunately.
Indeed. I have to ask you this. Have you ever queued up to catch a glimpse of a footballing hero?
Guilty, Sally. I have indeed. Unfortunately, I have to admit that. But it was not Ronaldo.
It was
his biggest rival, Messi, that I had to get a glimpse of once.
When was that? Yesterday?
Far too recent, I have to say.
Thanks very much indeed. Well, as Lewis mentioned, with awe, I think we all noticed, Scotland's men are getting ready to play Portugal tomorrow night at Hampden, and one of the stars is, of course, the superstar striker Cristiano Ronaldo. We saw him training today at St Mirren's ground in Paisley, and young fans had been gathering, hoping for a glimpse. Gillian Sharp joined them.
The moment they'd all been waiting for, the Portugal team bus arriving at St Mirren this afternoon ahead of training. All eyes out for one of the world's most famous footballers, Ronaldo. Many had waited for hours, and for one young fan, a rare prize, a Ronaldo signature on his football boot and book.
It was crazy. I don't think he'd come over, but I just screamed as much as I could at him. And I went and screamed at him. I was up there and I had my hanger hanging out like that for ages. So yeah, it's crazy.
And for others in the crowd, there was at least a glimpse of their idol.
Did you see Ronaldo?
Yeah.
What was it like?
Very fun and exciting. I just saw him and he just waved at some people.
And did you feel that maybe he waved at you as well?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, I really wanted to see Ronaldo.
Why?
Because he's my idol.
Rafael going all the way. And this is the kind of performance here at the weekend against Poland which has brought him worldwide fame.
I manage the Cristiano Ronaldo that is trying to work hard to help the team to win tomorrow. When you arrive in a stadium, in a place like this, I think you get to know the iconic figure and the career of a player that is unique.
This afternoon, here at St Mirren in Paisley, it's been all about Portugal. But tomorrow night at Hampden, the hope is that Scotland can take centre stage. Gillian Sharp reporting Scotland, Paisley.
And now the weather with the man who went viral with his singing on Friday. No time tonight, though.
No, it was a combined effort, those great dancing moves, but I'm sure my great uncle that wrote that song will be fair chuffed. It was heard across the country, but you'd be saying, going viral, what's that, Callum? I think you need to go and see the doctor about that. But it was a lovely day, wasn't it just? But we had a frosty start, minus 4.1 there at Aboyne, 0. Glasgow and Edinburgh, even Shetland, Baltussown minus 1.6. We did have that front though in the northwest, which was breaking for parts of the mainland for some sunny spells, but also in places giving some patchy rain. That clears to the north. We've got a gusty, milder southeasterly tomorrow. Coastal gales for the west coast, Banff and Buchan coast too. It'll be bringing more cloud, but the sunniest conditions in the north. Then wash out Wednesday, followed by a showery air mass on Thursday, and then more low pressure towards Friday and into the weekend, bringing more strong winds at times and some spells of rain. But it is a fine end to the day out there, and we'll see an early dip in temperatures central southern Scotland, perhaps low enough for a grass frost through the early hours for some before we see the arrival of more expansive cloud layers, thick enough for a little bit light rain and drizzle in places. Staying clearest in inland parts of the north where we will have a frost, but not so for the breezier coasts and isles. Tomorrow will be a blustery, if not windy day itself, more expansive cloud layers central southern Scotland. In places, a wee skim of drizzle, particularly for some of the upslopes where we'll have hill fog over the hills. But with that mild airflow, 14 degrees in numbers, a few brighter breaks possible at times in the cloud sheet downwind of the hills itself. But generally that cloud will be bulking up across the southern Highlands, meaning Lochaber northwards into northwest Highlands, Moray, North Aberdeenshire. A lovely day, may even reach 15, 16 in a few places. Also good for the Northern Isles, but that cloud will be shearing up the Hebrides. Into tomorrow night itself, we'll see more expansive cloud layers giving some patchy rain and drizzle before more substantial rain arrives into the west and the south, and a very mild night with those gusty winds, particularly strong for coastal areas once more, which will be also the case into Wednesday. The gales transfer into the northeast, breezy still up the west coast, spells of rain expanding northwards, heaviest for the southern and eastern upslopes of the Highlands, and Dumfries and Galloway, and a top temperature of sweet 16. Sally.
Thanks very much, Callum. And that's Reporting Scotland. Laura McKeever will be here with your late news at around 10:30 tonight. But until then, from everyone in the team, do enjoy your evening. Bye-bye.